I'd learned about, if I'd understood my condition earlier, I could have helped myself so much more in the UK, which is that just over 70% of adults with autism are not in any sort of job at all. 70% of autistic adults unemployed. That is just crazy. In reality, I think that people have to read a lot of different definitions. It's the case that one definition is never right. And it's the case that you don't only look at one type of person who it can impact. You always, in my view anyway, should have a balanced view. And I think actually balanced view is the most important term to use in this case.
Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Steven Ingram. Steven is the founder of Neurodiversity Together. He has autism and ADHD. And before founding Neurodiversity Together, he spent 15 years in management consultancy with focus on topics including people, culture, change, learning, and HR transformation. He now combines his lived and professional experiences to bring fresh ideas and perspectives that have enabled numerous individuals and businesses to better embrace neurodiversity at work. In a short space of time, his work has contributed to a client being recognized at the RIDI Awards, Recruitment Industry Disability Initiative, and he has contributed to the Sir Robert Buckland Review of Autism Employment. Welcome, Steven.
Hi, Cindy, and thank you for having me.
You're very much welcome, Steven. So, Steven, honestly, I've been really eager to chat with you ever since I came across your story on Arab Global News. And in that news, you shared a story about your neurodiversity and inclusivity perspective. And your story really resonated with me, especially as someone who was also diagnosed with autism during my childhood. So now in this podcast, finally, I'd like to use this opportunity to ask you the questions that I've been really wanting to ask. So the very first question, Steven, about your motivation. Could you share with us your personal journey that led you to found Neurodiversity Together platform, and also what pivotal moments or challenges that inspired you to take this path?
Yeah, sure. So I got my autism diagnosis in the late 90s. At that time, it's something that wasn't really spoken about at all. I didn't really understand what it meant for me. I just knew all of the generic things that I read online or that people told me. I really went like that through sort of just acknowledging my condition for many years, through school, through uni, through work, until 2018, when really I decided to really embrace my condition and really learn what it meant for me, to see a psychiatrist again, and to really ask sort of what can I be doing better to help myself? How can I learn about myself in a better way? That also led to my ADHD diagnosis that came in 2019. Now, in 2019, like you've said, we were both working for Arup. You should never have waited this long to speak. You could have messaged me any time, really.
Thank you.
But what I started to realize was that my experience as a consultant helping clients with um, complex culture change, and actually the sorts of things that I was going through as a neurodivergent person at work, they had a lot of um, um, cross over, and that really I could apply some of the same things that I told to my clients into the neurodiversity space, and it would really help me um, um, understand what I needed from others and what others needed from me. What I also found was that there are many other neurodivergent people who I've said the same things to, and it's helped them tremendously. Um, so that's a bit about my diagnosis journey and my personal journey. With regards to what led to me starting Neurodiversity Together,
Yeah.
um, after I left a job last year, I was
Mhm.
thinking about what I really wanted to do next. I was offered another job very quickly, but then I just thought, do I really want to go into another job, or do I want to do something that will make me a lot prouder of what I'm doing, something where I can help others? And I thought the latter, really. Neurodiversity together isn't only about helping others, it's
Yeah.
also about giving a different message. So, as a mid-senior level management consultant, a lot of the training, a lot of the information out there on um, autism, ADHD, having a stammer, many other things, I didn't really feel that it spoke for somebody who had similar experiences to me. It made it look that I would need loads of help,
Yeah.
not just a bit of help here or there. I also um, um, tap in to how embracing neurodiversity can really help a company massively increase their bottom line. Um, for example, in the UK, um, there's an estimated cost of approximately 40 to 45 billion pounds a year on
Wow.
UK companies through not properly embracing um, neurodiversity in the workplace. Now that's a massive amount of um, money,
Yeah.
and I really work with companies to help them understand how they can um, better integrate ways of working or processes to tap in to some of that um, figure, but also to improve the culture for everyone in the workplace, not only their neurodivergent people.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Wow, that's really powerful what you just said. And I believe that your platform will help a lot of people within your within the neurodivergent community, but also raise awareness to non-neurodivergent people as well.
Thank you.
Um, Stephen, how would you define neurodiversity, and what specific frameworks and approaches does your platform, the Neurodiversity Together, use to improve the neurodiversity in workplace settings?
That's such a tricky question because neurodiversity can mean something so different to so many different people.
Yeah.
And I don't really like to go with a set definition. I mean, at the end of the day, neurodiversity is broadly described as differences in the way that people might think.
Yeah.
You've obviously got medical definitions, legal definitions, so on and so forth. I think that what you've really got to do is understand what neurodiverse conditions are, and there's a huge range, and that they include dyslexia, dyscalculia, ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, OCD, and I'm sure many, many more. Now, within each of those conditions, there's no one set rule. There could be somebody whose autism is really, really mild and they're a very senior business leader, somebody whose autism is a lot more pronounced, and they need a totally different range of support or assistance, or their skills may be very different. There's no one set rule. I think for me, really, when I'm explaining to companies what neurodiversity it is, I always give a blended explanation of not only looking at what some of the conditions are and what some of those conditions might mean for different people, but to also look at what some of the experiences might mean too. Neurodiversity isn't only a list of conditions, it's also how it can affect people in different ways, whether they've got a neurodivergent condition or not. What I mean by that is because of how my conditions present themselves at different times, I might find putting my two young boys to bed really, really hard, in which case my wife will have to do a lot more of the work for bedtime. So it affects her. In the UK, if a child needs assistance at school, getting to a place where the plan with the adjustments and the support for the child, getting that in place can be like having an entire extra full-time job. Now that's crazy. Imagine having to do all of that work as well as having a regular job. It's crazy. So neurodiversity, to summarize, sorry, because I've waffled on a lot. In reality, I think that people have to read a lot of different definitions. It's the case that one definition is never right, and it's the case that you don't only look at one type of person who it can impact. You always, in my view anyway, should have a balanced view, and I think actually balanced view is the most important term to use in this case.
And I think we would love to hear more about some real experience or real examples based on your own experience of how embracing neurodiversity has benefited organization that you have worked with.
Yeah, sure. So it's an interesting one. It is a constantly moving model, but it's really helping people understand things from different points of view. So, for example, for neurodivergent people who I've worked with, who I've coached, I always speak to them about how they are disclosing their condition if they are disclosing, and then work with them to help them understand how they can disclose in a much, much more effective way to tell their story better in a way that will let others help them. When it comes to companies, I'll give them examples from my own journey, but also from from others' journeys too. And I'll say things like, imagine if you were that person at that time, how would you feel? What would you want done differently? And then from that, we work out different options that a company might use to implement something differently. And I think really it is that sort of perspective that's really, really important. My company's called Neurodiversity Together, quite simply because neurodiversity can't just be done by one person.
Yeah.
Neuro inclusion must have everybody working hand in hand. It must have everybody not just having a vague awareness of what something is, but understanding what something feels like, understanding what it feels like for lots of different people. And then once everybody's working together as a team, success is so much easier to get.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. Your statement about the storytelling caught my attention for some reason, and I think it is really interesting how you brought that up, because sometimes, you know, as a unique individuals, we can raise our voice to, let's say, disclose our condition, but to be heard is another, I think, another challenge.
And I think that on that point, Neurodiversity Together have a range of different templates, and we've also mapped out different stakeholders or different people at different stages of the disclosure journey to really understand how best to help them. So for example, I spoke with somebody who hadn't previously disclosed their condition to their company, quite simply because their condition wasn't necessarily impacting their day-to-day work. They were just doing it, they were doing well, but they wanted to go for promotion. And one of the promotion criteria this person wasn't quite meeting because of their neurodiverse condition. And they were speaking to me about how can they best disclose, not to necessarily get a free pass up to the next level, but to make sure that they're treated in a fair way and in an equitable way. And it's things like that really are so important. A lot of people, when they hear disclosure, they just think, oh, somebody's going to share all about their condition immediately. Actually, it's not always like that. Different people will disclose at different points, but also when they disclose, they need to have the right templates and the right guidance. They need to learn, or they need to know about some of the common barriers that other people often experience. They need to also think about some things to prepare themselves, such as their story, but also just to think about what do they want from disclosing. It's so important to include all of these different factors into that story.
Wow, yeah. Now, after I heard about these challenges, especially in the workplace settings, I would like to know your opinion. What steps can managers and colleagues take to offer better support?
So I'm going to start in a different place, which is what can neurodivergent people do to help them?
Okay.
Like I said before, I was diagnosed with autism in the late 90s, but I didn't embrace what my condition really meant for me until 2018 and didn't get my ADHD diagnosis until 2019. If I'd understood my condition earlier, I could have helped myself so much more.
Yeah.
And I would encourage anybody with a condition not to be scared of it, but to um, embrace it, to know that you're not at, alone, to know that there are so many success stories out there, but to also know that my career could have been vastly different. I may not have had to have the struggles that I had in my career if only I'd learned about things sooner. So that's my first piece of advice. For managers and colleagues, one important term that I always tell people is they need to go from acknowledgement to understanding. Now, various different workplace laws in different locations might limit what a manager or colleague can ask the person. But if if somebody says that they've got, or if somebody says they've got um, um, dyslexia, let's say, and they're finding things really hard, well, that's
Yeah.
fine. You can say, yep, okay, that's all good. But actually, why not go one step further and just ask the person, what does it feel like? Help me understand some of those problems or help me understand some of your feelings. And it could be that the person just says, well, it's really frustrating. I get annoyed. That's it. But actually, they might say, I feel so alone. I don't necessarily feel like I can do this job when something like that or like one of my struggles comes along. And it's just adding one extra question which opens the door and adds an entire level of extra richness to that conversation. I think that as well as managers and colleagues, there are things that businesses can be doing differently. Um, um, I've created frameworks for um, health checks on which, sorry, health checks to help companies assess their neuro inclusion maturity and work with them um, to make um, a roadmap of recommendations that they can implement to really make things better. And those things don't necessarily need to be separate processes, or they don't necessarily need to be massive things. Quite often, the biggest change that a company can make is something very small. Um, I think as well, actually, like I mentioned before, I always look to help companies not only make things better for neurodivergent people, but for everyone across the workplace. Um, to that extent, I'm very lucky with the career that I've had. I understand at a good enough level many processes within the employee life cycle at a company level. So I can so I also work with companies to basically help them look at what they can add. So, for example, steps they can add, guidance they can add to part of their global process or part of their central process, not having to make a workaround for a neurodivergent person that will benefit everybody in the company. So a couple of different things there.
Maybe last question I would like to ask you, Stephen. How do you envision workplaces becoming more inclusive for neurodiverse individuals? And what role do you believe education and advocacy will play in driving this change forward?
Big question. I think that we've already seen workplaces becoming much more neuro inclusive because they're just starting to talk about it. I do think, though, there's still a huge amount of work to be done. So there was a study by a company called envisions. They found that in 2022, disabled people in the UK, now this is all um, um, disabled people, only 7% earned more than £30,000 per year. Now that's a shocking amount.
Yeah.
It is, it, when you consider the cost of living, and I'm based in London, when you consider the cost of living, somebody on less than £30,000 would really struggle to live in London. And just because it really is a shocking figure, and it highlights that there's still so much um, room to improve. There's also another stat in the UK, which is that just over 70% of adults with autism are not in any sort of job at all. 70% of autistic adults unemployed. That is just crazy.
Yes.
So whilst I think that there are some very good conversations happening, whilst I think that companies are moving in the right direction, there's still so much work.
Yeah.
I think that education, like you mentioned, is very important. I think that one of the interesting things that I always explore with my clients is what does the right education look like for a particular audience or a company? So, for example, it might be there may be some companies who want to have a really lengthy training course because that's what their people need. Others who might get a lot more value from having something shorter.
Mm.
It is basically about really highlighting that there's no one size fits all solution out there. Each company is different, each person or each type of role may not necessarily need to know the same thing. I think that with regards to advocacy, though, going forwards, advocacy is interesting because you can have a lot of people who are advocates, but actually, I come back to my balanced point of view. If somebody advocates for neurodiversity, but they only advocate for people who need a lot of help, then actually that may not necessarily be the helping all neurodivergent people. If somebody at a senior leadership level with a neurodivergent condition says, well, I've got this condition, so anybody can do what I'm doing, not necessarily. Their condition may present itself in a different way. Equally, so that person, although their intention is good, although they're trying to encourage others, actually by saying something like that, does it do more harm than good or not? Who knows? It is different for every person. But with regards to balance, though, that's why I always ensure that I always think about somebody who might need a lot more support from me. somebody like me who might need, let's say, middle off-road support, and I use that very, very loosely, by the way, but then somebody who will need very little support too. So that there's a nice balance of different examples, different stories there that give people that information to be able to formulate a couple of different points of view, not just one.
Wow, thank you so much, Stephen. That's really powerful, and your insights today has been very enlightening for me as well, and I very much hope that it will also enlighten my audience who watch this podcast. And perhaps your final words for today, Stephen.
So I think my final words is a shameless um, sales plug, really. Whether you are a neurodivergent person, whether you are somebody listening to this thinking about how to make a company more neuro inclusive, do get in touch, and we can speak about a solution that looks right for you. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be expensive. Like I said, there's never a one size fits all. It is what is right. But ultimately, though, if you either look me up on LinkedIn, or if you go to www.neurodiversitytogether.com, and that's one word, or if you email me on Stephen at neurodiversitytogether.com, you can find out more. But also, though, many thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you so much for the time and your energy and your insight. It has been very inspirational, impactful, and powerful as well. And that concludes our episode today. Stay tuned for more stories of compassion and advocacy in the episodes to come. Until next time, remember, kindness is contagious, so let's keep spreading it far and wherever you go.